All right, so we're gonna go through this, and this gives us a good understanding of what you're capable of doing in your movements. So when we look at the mobility, your restrictions, your mobility is gonna affect how you're able to move, also your athleticism, how quick you are, how strong you are, how explosive you are. So trunk rotation's tight, so that's gonna affect hip to shoulder separation. So optimizing hip to shoulder separation is an elite movement. Basically, getting your hips to open more at landing as you keep your trunks more closed. The more we can do that, it's like a spring loading, it then launches your upper body and transfers and multiplies that energy. So you're gonna be tight there in your ability to keep your trunk back. Your hip abduction on the right side was actually good. Your ankle mobility is gonna affect your ground forces. So you're weak in your ankles, so you're gonna not have good ability to create force. Your femur rotation wasn't too bad, it's a little tight. Actually, I'd say it's below average. So that's right here, internal rotation. For me to open my hips at landing, to bring my pelvis around, I have to fully internally rotate my femur. That allows my hips to open. Also too, down here in hip extension, you're gonna be a little tight. That's not gonna allow you to fully extend your hip open. So you're gonna be tight and your ability to get your hips open and keep your shoulders closed. So you're gonna be challenged to optimize separation. Grip strength is below average. That correlates to velocity because typically guys that throw hard have the ability to stabilize their elbows. So it doesn't mean you're gonna throw harder just by getting your grip strength up. It means you have the strength to be able to handle more velocity. Your overall strength at your age was good. It just could get a lot better. Your quickness on your left side, because you're a left-handed pitcher, is average. Your vertical jump, poor. We're putting you at 225. A major league average vertical jump at 225 is 31 inches. All your power could definitely go way up. I mean, you're 16, so you have a good year that you should just focus on just crushing your power and getting your power up. Your wide balance, it's a predictor of how well you use your kinetic chain. It's below average. That could link to some of the mobility issues, and there could be some stability issues as well. So let's look at your delivery. So coming out of leg lift, you see you barely load down into that leg. You don't even really abduct that hip. So elite guys are going to sit longer into this back leg to build more momentum as they fall out of leg lift, to get more flexion, to create more what we call triple extension, and then to get the shin linear. And you can see you're barely getting into that back leg, and could be a strength issue. Obviously, all those mobility issues, lower mobility, like the ankle issue. So, for example, like if we go down to the trail leg here, see how this right here in the trail leg, the back leg, right there is when it goes down. That means you're extending, because this is flexion. Flexion's this way, extension's that way. So it's 70 degrees you're starting to extend. And the elite guy started extending at 77 to closer to 80 degrees, or not degrees, percent of your stride. What that means is you're at this point in your stride, you're about a foot from the rubber, and you're already trying to come out of your back leg. An elite guy, he'd be all the way down here, 80% of his stride before he started driving that back leg. So that means they sit into that leg much longer, right? So you can see also too, your knee starts to go inward. You start to kind of collapse your knee. So it's not a dynamically loaded lower half, and therefore you're not going to get a lot of power into landing. So at landing, your hips are completely closed. Your shoulders are closed, but your hips are completely closed. So if we look at like the hip to shoulder separation, it's positive at landing, which means your hips are slightly ahead of your trunk, but there's probably no speed through it. So if you look at the speeds at landing, your pelvis rotation is 300 degrees per second, 333. And elite guys' pelvis speeds would be like 700, 800. So there's just no acceleration in your body right now. At the end of the day, that's the only way we're gonna get acceleration of the ball, is we have to start moving it through the body. So from here, you can see your hips and shoulders sync up pretty quick, and they come around together. You see that red line and that red line in the middle? That's when they're peaking. So they sync up pretty quick, and then they start peaking together. The elite guy is gonna peak here first, and then peak the trunk, and you're gonna see the separation between the two. And what that's gonna do, it's gonna push more force through the trunk. And if you look at your forward trunk flexion, you're at 9 degrees when your arm lays back, and the elite guy would be 30 degrees, and he'd start having an extended front leg. All these things would be if you would have built more momentum falling on a leg lift, if you would have loaded and driven harder, you would have pushed more force, you'd have increased your stride length, you'd have stayed back to harness that energy, and then you'd see a lot more energy going forward at the end. You do something like that, and that's when your velocity goes up like 15 miles. I mean, it's dramatic at that point. But you're not gonna be able to do that until you get the mobility improved, specifically get the power in your body, the explosiveness in your body, the upper body strength to be able to handle those forces. That's gonna be key for these things to start happening. So we have to build that in with all the training, right? So that's the goal with the program. You've got a lot of horizontal and vertical movement, which means probably because when typically things come together like that, they get really rotational. So what happens is if the trunk's really rotational, the arm will fly out, you start dropping your spin axis, and you start splitting, the ball starts going both horizontal and vertical, as opposed to sharp in one movement as opposed to the other. So we really want to get 20 plus in one movement. Your total spin was actually good it matches your velocity. So the thing is when your velocity goes up, you're gonna see total spin go up, and if you can separate it better and not fly out, it should go into your vertical movement, and then you'll get it all into your vertical. And then it makes it a lot easier to start throwing like breaking pitches and stuff like that. Cool.